Get out to build the arms lab.
Okay, HMRT's down. I'm gonna start working the system.
Yep, all assists. See if you guys can make another hit on Flight Control Harvester. Group up and grump and hit it again.
I'm gonna hit crevice right at the same time as you guys.
Good plan.
Try and get their RT. Somebody try and the south tunnel to ramp up the north tunnel to take out the RT north tunnel.
Look at that animation. Yep.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Nexus Esports Edition. Today we have with us two unique guests from Nexzil Gaming, specifically the Natural Selection 2 team. We have Bitey and VIrsoul. How are you guys tonight?
I'm good.
Wonderful.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity and your time for joining us. Let's talk a bit about yourselves and how are you guys involved? How is your history with esports? Let's start with you, Bitey.
Well, you know, I would always have considered myself a big amateur gamer. Amateur professional. I guess, you know, I actually got started probably about 3 years ago in like an indie source mod called Dystopia. And then I kind of branched out from there, winning stuff along the way. Went to Half-Life 2 Deathmatch, then went to Left 4 Dead 2. Then I actually got my big break in Crisis 2, where I actually managed to win a few $100 at tournaments, and then got some cool stuff from Asus for promotional items. And then I kind of picked up NS2 from friends' recommendations. And then I guess this is actually the first startup sponsor team that I've ever been on.
Nice, nice. And how about you, VIrsoul?
Yeah, this is actually the first professional team I would say that I've ever been on. I had some history before with Counter-Strike, Tribes 2, and then a lot of the original Natural Selection, but never on any sort of organized team like we are right now. So really excited to be part of Nexzil Gaming at the moment.
Nice, nice. And before we go into the details of your team, the gameplay, the strategy, what could you guys tell me about Nexzil Gaming? How new or how old you guys are, and how many venues do you guys have currently?
Well, from what I gathered from basically who is my boss, in quotations, is that they started roughly a year ago, and the founder was around back then, and he kind of pumped in money to kind of get this stuff started. We had a few teams crop up. I think it was originally a TF2 winner of some of their tournaments. From what I know, this is, you know, my history with it's probably been about 6 months now. And then they kind of butted off with starting in a game called Nexzil is where I actually saw them, but I never was a part of them. And then there's some Shoot Mania teams, Counter-Strike, Black Ops 2 for the 360, and I think that's where they've all branched out for now.
Yeah, there was a League of Legends team as far as I was aware, and some StarCraft players.
People from Nexzil Gaming were looking for you, or did you guys contact it first?
I think VIrsoul would know more about this one, because he was here at the start.
It was kind of bizarre actually. Neither one of us were looking for each other. There was a player that knew the owner of Nexzil and had and knew our team as well, just as we were forming, and kind of did sort of a love connection sort of thing and introduced us to each other. And then it was a really great fit. We hit off from there and became a team shortly after.
When was the first time that you guys found out about Natural Selection 2? I mean, you mentioned how, but when was it? Was it you first, VIrsoul?
Oh, it was years ago when they were first developing Natural Selection, because it's been in the mix for a long time now. So I've been following it throughout the alpha process and everything. I haven't started playing until about I think it's about a year ago now. I was kind of jumping on it late. It looked kind of rough to begin with, but as it started forming into a game, that's really when I kind of picked it up.
Were you the responsible forming a team or finding people for that became the team?
Originally, it was mostly two separate teams that kind of formed together to form a super team. And then we were kind of looking for an identity, and that's where Nexzil kind of came along.
Nice, nice. And was in that moment that you also met Bitey and the other members?
The other members originally, we've gone through some roster changes between now and then. I know originally we wanted Bitey on the team, but he was with another team at that moment. He ended up joining us later on. We still do have some original members such as Locklear and Blink, but we have some newer members as well who are, everyone on our team is an excellent player. But yeah, not everyone here, I'd say about half the team is still original from when we first formed.
In your experience within gaming and esports, how would you best describe, according to your views, the experience of playing Natural Selection 2?
I would say that Natural Selection 2 is a lot more focused on strategy and team coordination. You can't just go Rambo, or you also can't focus completely on just killing the other team because so much more involved into it. There's a lot of layers with the game. And you are correct. There's the first-person shooter aspect where most of the team is on the field, trying to get kills or secure points. And then there's also the commander role, which is more of an RTS aspect. But it's a little bit more complicated than that in the fact that you have to control live players instead of AI units.
I would like to chime in right there, and the game is kind of like, as you learn to play the game, like I've noticed I've played like 800 hours now, and every 300 hours or so, maybe every 150, I've kind of changed my mentality each time that I kind of evolve in the state of a player. Because when I first come in, it's like, your generic guy is like, oh, well, I'm a Marine, I've got a gun, and it's like Call of Duty, right? So you go around and you want a deathmatch. Then you're like, wow, I'm still losing, my team loses. It's like, what's wrong with my team? So then we got to say, well, it's not just deathmatching, there's a whole bunch more to it. I always felt, as an evolution as a player, you start understanding that more and more, it's not so much, I always felt that it's not really an RTS game. It's probably about 10 to 15% RTS management. But what you have is VIrsoul, who is the comm. He's the one with all the information, and he relays it to his field units, and then we make stuff happen based on that. And I kind of feel like, it's more like a real war type thing, I guess. You got your general, who's got all the information, then you got your soldiers, who march around and get stuff done.
How do you guys coordinate in the initial stage of a match, be it an alien or be it the frontiersman?
Well, in the initial stage of a match, we have most of our early game planned out. We do a lot of practicing, a lot of scrimming versus other teams, trying out different tweaks to our strategy. And I would say for the setup of a match, there's very little talking. We already know exactly what we're going to do, I would say, within the first 3 to 4 minutes of a match. So the coordination there is all pretty much done pre-game. It's more when you get into the mid to late game when you really got to work on responsiveness and coordination.
Yeah, it's a kind of an interesting play. Like, it's not even, he says pre-game. What he really means is like before we even get to the field, and hours before then we kind of talk over what we have. It's kind of like you have pre-casted strategies that you're gonna, openings like StarCraft. You'd have an opening that you'd want to go for, be it a Craig hive first, which is a type of defensive structure, or going through a shade, risky gamble all-in play, which is another type of hive.
True.
And you just base your stuff off of that kind of thing.
Is there flexibility to switching techs? Like, for example, if you're going for Craig tech as first, but then changing the tech tree or going through another tech path, if you will?
There's some options to change your tech, but it requires further expanding. For instance, if you wanted to change your hive, like you mentioned, you'd have to actually get an additional hive, and you could do it from that point. There's some leniency with switching up your tech, but it's pretty rigid in the fact that once you're set on a path, you have to take that path, and you have to expand out and expand your options in order to pick up new things.
The maps that are currently available and how they play the role in the history or the development of a match.
Each team has a front. Like, the combat happens in these zones, and you try to push it forward, or you try to, or it gets pushed back against you if you're starting to lose. And you only really see these fronts when from the top-down view. You actually can't tell on the ground view. It feels like you're just fighting, wherever it happens. But the engagements actually form up in these zones that always happen to be a hotspot, depending on how far forward your team manages to push. It's kind of like a weird thing that you don't notice on the field, but I don't know if you notice it, VIrsoul. Like when we have a line on the front where the fighting usually happens, it stays there for a while until we either push forward or we pull back.
The maps are mostly random spawns. They're static to a point with how you'll spawn on some maps, but there's a lot of a mystery factor, especially on a map like Summit, where there's 4 spawns around the edge, and then both teams can start at any spot. So you have to be ready to kind of adjust to wherever the other team is going to be and wherever you're going to start. It's not like, you can just say, well, we're going to be here, they're going to be there, this is exactly what we're going to do before you even start. There's some leeway there, and you got to be ready to adjust and force your opponent into a certain position as well.
How do you guys determine that? Like, for example, if you see that the Marines are going for a shotgun tech, for instance, can you also determine, well, they might have spent this amount of resources, they only have maybe 2 or 3 resource points captured and only 1 command center and whatnot, so they must have this amount of resources. Could you guys, during a match, could you guys determine that and then elaborate on a tactical strategy?
Oh, absolutely. I would say that it's much easier earlier in the game, before, like, I would say the 8 to 10 minute mark. Past that, it's kind of like a wild card, not knowing exactly. You get a rough idea. But for instance, there's this thing, I'll give you a good example, is resource locking, which essentially is if you take down harvesters, like for instance on the alien side, if you take down enough where they can't drop another harvester, that's where you resource lock them and they can't get any more resources. They're just stuck at where they're at, no more life forms, no more upgrades. If you keep kind of track of what they're doing, for instance, if they go an early upgrade, that is a lot of early resources spent, and if you get a couple of harvesters down, then all of a sudden it's game over. And you can get a good idea about when exactly that's going to happen. And during a few of our matches, you'll actually hear us call out that that's going to happen, and we'll go for it. I've been doing a lot of streaming recently from our games while we're playing them. And I think one of them might even been from the Damage Networks game, if I'm not mistaken. It might have been a different game, where we were on Vale, and we called out a res lock before we were doing it.
What would be the most default strategy for both races that you guys see that is the strongest way to go?
As the aliens right now, your safest bet is always the hive called the Craig Hive, which is defensive, so you get extra armor or faster regeneration. And then on the Marine side, your bread and butter is usually, if you want to try to maximize yourself early on, you want to go for upgrades. It'd be armory upgrades and then some mines, or something like that. VIrsoul would know these orders more than I do, since he's calm.
Yeah, there's a few different choices. Typically, you'll see what Bitey said on the alien side, an early upgraded Crag Hive with probably Carapace, which allows you to get the extra armor, followed by 1 to 2 extra harvesters. That's pretty standard. What you'll see most of the time. It used to be kind of the metagame to do an early hive drop. But that's been kind of phased out with some more patches that have come recently. And I'm sure that moving forward with new patches, you'll see that change again, where it won't always be an upgrade first followed by harvesters. Another popular one, which you're talking about with a 6 pool strategy, I would kind of equate that to a shade hive, which allows the aliens to pick up either a silence or, more popular, the camouflage upgrade, which allows you to remain completely hidden as long as you move slowly. So, for instance, you could go all camouflage, walk into the Marine base, and just destroy everything. But it's a big risky play, just as a 6 pool is, because if it doesn't work and the other team sets up for it, then you're in a huge trouble. Oh, alright, well, the response isn't really so much of a big deal to deal with tech choices. Tech choices are usually, when you see something on the other side, responding to a tech choice is relatively simple most of the time. It takes a little bit of time in order to get set up for what you need. So that's not really a big deal. The more pressing thing with reaction is dealing with things, like I said before, with base rushes or getting hit at multiple spots at once. That's much more of a pressing thing than seeing someone's tech choice and trying to adapt to it.
It's more like it's positional awareness, and your responses are actually what your comm tells you to go to. Say that you've got all your RTs are being hit, but you're making a push on a hive, the real response is, do you want to keep going for the hive? Do you want to pull someone off to save your RTs? Or perhaps you catch an Onos that's moving out, but it's not attacking you. Do you want to try to catch the Onos on its flank? I think that kind of separates it from a normal RTS, is that it's actually what do you want to do with your units most of the time instead of what kind of tech you want to go for.
So let's talk about that gameplay and the team's synergy about it.
The role of the commander is it's definitely unique in the fact that you have the most control over what is happening. Your mistakes are larger mistakes, and your ability to contribute to the team is more than, say, a single other person on the field would be. It's also imperative for you to be able to witness things on the field and give clear, concise directions about what to do. Because while someone on the field can pull up their map and tell someone on the other side, hey, whoever's over here, go and do this, I think, it's much easier for the commander who is constantly watching to know exactly who's where, what the situation is, to be calling out what's going on. Behind that, trying to, for instance, keep the team alive with med packs, given information about where the other team is, keep upgrades going, things like that. So it is rather stressful, but if your team's coordinated, it makes the job much, much easier.
A cool thing I would like to kind of talk about is, like, our team, we've probably really been evolving our game since I really joined and started kind of organizing everybody up a little bit more and bringing in players who are sharp. We've evolved as, like, tactics-wise. Like VIrsoul says, the comm should be the one making all the calls, but originally, we never used to do that. It was kind of a tag team effort, and it feels like, as I sub for other teams and play with other people, it seems like it's a natural evolution of strategies to where you should start eventually to understand that your comm should be your one always telling you what to do as players, because many teams, it's kind of a hodgepodge, like, guys, let's do this, or how about we do this, or let's go over here, when in reality, your most effective FPS player, you know, the ones who are great at all video games, what they really want is they want to be able to focus on their FPS skills. They don't want to have to make decisions, you know. As a guy who's always on the field, I don't want to have to make calls. All I want to be able to focus on is what's in the room, what's going on around me, and if I need to know, my comm will tell me anything else that I should know.
True. How much leeway does the game have in terms of, let's say VIrsoul, you know, as comm, says, okay, do this, go grab the resource point or resource node and whatnot. Depending on the player in the field, he will accomplish that task with a certain effectiveness, but depending on the situation, he might say, you know, this is a bad idea, I don't think this is good, I'm not going to do it. I mean, is there much of a leeway or liberty in that sense?
I think we try to limit that, particularly during our practice matches. It's better to do it and then talk about it afterwards. If you are talking and debating in the middle, then it creates a lot of that waffling back and forth, like Bitey had mentioned earlier, and then nothing gets accomplished. So it's better to kind of just follow through and then discuss afterwards.
Yeah, like what I always notice, you know, it's nothing against new teams. It's just they get bogged down in decision making. We used to be guilty of it too. We would have so much indecision, like, do we really want to make this push now? Do we want to go over there, and do we want to get this done, or do we want to do this? When in reality, inaction is basically, you know, nothing happens, and you need to make progress. If you're not making progress, or you're not making actions, then you're being stagnant. And that's something that you don't want to ever have as a team. You know, I used to be paramount of, like, hold your line and get your tech up. And it's like, you can't do that. It has to be, you have to keep forward, you have to keep pressuring, and you also have to keep building, which is kind of like the thing of the Marine side. And it's just this constant, you know, listen to your commander, do what he says, because, you know, he told you to do it, it's just easier that way. When you follow it, usually stuff gets done faster. Or if not, then you can go over it later.
Do you think that for new people, knowing natural selection 2, and trying to get into it, is it a very steep learning curve?
Oh, I would say it's a very difficult learning curve. The game does a lot of things, but it's not very intuitive, I would argue. There's a lot of people who want to play Marine just because it's familiar, and then the aliens all have the different life forms, which all behave quite differently. It's one thing to try and learn how they work. It's quite another thing to learn how to use them effectively. And I think that's the big thing that's really keeping a lot of people from moving forward, or having a lot of people get frustrated with the game, is just not feeling very effective as a player. Um, it's a very steep learning curve, but I think it's also very rewarding in the fact that it's not too simple to play. Once you do get good with, say, a Skulk or a Fade or some other life form, or get good with, a certain way of playing as a Marine, you feel great about it. It's something that you've accomplished. You did something awesome.
I don't want to backtrack on VIrsoul, but when it comes to new players, it's just Marine is not like COD. It's not like a COD game where you can Rambo everything. It's actually more the inverse. Your aliens are actually your typical FPS player. That's where you'd want to go if you'd want to actually like deathmatch and play more like any other FPS game. Whereas the Marine side, it's always you have to focus on three things. You've got to build, you have to defend, and you also have to attack. And it's those three things that are so hard to like come to understand. And I went through that struggling process for a long time until this is before Nexzil, but it's just there's so much to learn, and so much of it is really just kind of a little bit counterintuitive in general. It's just don't push here because the aliens are going to be spawning there, and that's going to be dangerous. So you should hold here, wait a few seconds, and then you should push in. And you also want to the way that you take fights is you want to have the most distance between you and the target, which is sometimes a little bit different comparatively to an FPS game where it's like I want to cut the corner as sharp as I can to get the line of sight as soon as possible. But to get that alien, you want to take the corner as wide as you can so he can't get close to you and hit you. It's just little things like that make it a lot more challenging than your average FPS game.
And talking now about your team, was it you guys have been very strong and you have shown a lot of good strategy and communication within a match. Was that type of synergy very hard to achieve in the Natural Selection 2 setting?
I wouldn't say so. I mean, there's always a little bit of growing pains at the beginning, but teams who are professional-minded like we are, you really want to lock that down where you are able to coordinate and get things done quickly and efficiently. And there's always room to be working on that, but I don't feel like it's ever been a problem or a hurdle that we haven't been able to overcome.
As we climb, the tier of skill of teams, it's kind of like each evolution as we get better, we just start understanding more and more about the game. And it feels like, I can kind of see the progress of with the teams that I played with before. Just how you kind of climb up and you evolve and you just start understanding more and more about the game. And it's really kind of like an experience thing sometimes too. It's not always skill that wins your game. It's just to know how you need to fight.
Now, having discussed that, when moving more towards the current esports scene of Natural Selection 2, like for instance, let's talk about ENSL and what other tournaments there are for Natural Selection 2.
There's actually two other organizations going on right now. One is there's a tournament called the Sucky Gamer Tournament, which is run by a guy named Talutha. It's currently on the semifinals thing, and then there's also an ESL league, which is the Euro Electronic Sports League, and it's mostly Euros, but we're in all three of those, and it's just as this game gets bigger and bigger, more people keep opening up tournaments and cups and little events to play in.
But do you guys see anything that you would like to see improved within the esports scene?
I feel like the North American region feels a little maybe neglected. There's a lot more organized teams in the European area, which it makes it more sense that it would be more heavily oriented that direction for tournaments and things like that. But the sense I get from North American teams is that they feel like it doesn't really matter for them if they win or lose because it's all about Europe at the moment.
I would agree with that. Also, leagues are so much easier to set up in Europe. I don't want to really take it way off topic, but even in most modern games, the U.S. side of competition is kind of limited to where they are already established. In all the other games that I've played, the Euro leagues are always stronger in the indie titles or the titles that never really take off. It seems like the Euros always take the initiative to make that next step into organizing their leagues and having nice places to do so. And the Americans are just, we're just never really organized enough to set anything up, and it's sad.
How would you describe Natural Selection 2? What does it bring you as a gamer and also as a professional esports player? What experiences, fulfillment does it bring you?
I think it's kind of the thing that I really enjoy about it is how it ties everything together. That I know as a player of games, it uses every single bit of my knowledge, and it also made me have to learn like new ways of playing. And it's kind of like that goal of trying to learn anything that I can to make myself a better player has always kind of like pushed me to learn and buy new games. And the fact that when I first got to NS2, I understood nothing of it, and like it was like this daunting challenge of a book that looked like it couldn't be read, and I didn't know what I was doing. But then I'm like, I'm the kind of guy who doesn't want to quit, so I just spent all of my time in the last 6 months trying to master every tiny little detail of something. And that challenge of the game giving it to me is something that I love in gaming in general.
Yeah, back to what I mentioned earlier before about how the game is difficult, but if you reach the level where, you can do great things and become, truly good at certain aspects of the game, and it's very rewarding. I think that really applies to our team as well, where that's why we keep pushing, is that we like that it's rewarding. We feel really great when we, defeat other teams that are also on equal grounding as us, because we know that we had superior teamwork, or we did really great at we had really great skill that day on the field, things like that. I've played other games where you win and you feel good about it, but it's a little hollow, I would say. Whereas every time you have a victory in this tournament or a scrim against another equally matched team, it's like a really big victory. Like you want to stand up and kind of like throw your arms in the air.
I think it kind of comes from that, like, it requires so much teamwork is why it's so like it's a next step of satisfaction because you and your friends did it together. I kind of like that part about it.
Thank you so much for the opportunity and your time for interviewing you guys. Last but not least, is there any message and shout-outs from you guys?
Well, everybody who's, I have a lot of, I won't want to be vain, but everybody who's ever been a fan of me in whatever game, sup? I have a lot of friends in a lot of places. And, I tell people that my Steam list is full because it's full because I know so many people in so many different communities. And it's
Buddy's friends list is like his heart.
It is, and it stops growing, I guess. My heart stopped. But I'd like to give a thanks to all of them.
Yeah, just, I guess, shout out to the rest of the team that's not here at the moment, and then all the stream people who follow me. I have a lot of regular followers, and I'm really glad they stand by me every day to watch.
How can the viewers follow you, the team, and also you guys individually?
Right. Actually, Nexzil.com, we have a great website that's up right now. You can find links to all of our other locations there, as far as Facebook or Twitter and everything else, as well as see some of the live stream from the rest of our team there in various games. And then me individually on Twitch TV/VIrsoul, VIrsoul.
All I have is a YouTube, but I don't update it very much. But if you ever wanted to look at it, I can give you a link of L Xenobyte L. Yeah.
And well, once again, guys, thank you very much for your time. Please make sure to follow Nexzil Gaming and the Natural Selection 2 team. And yeah, good luck to you guys and all the best towards your future.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.